So this week I saw Kong Skull Island, and it's Warner Brothers' big reboot of their famous King Kong franchise, which started all the way back in 1933 with the famous Marion C. Cooper movie. And then, 40 years later, it got remade as the Jeff Bridges movie. And then Peter Jackson most famously brought it back to life in 2005, which leads us to now, where pretty much it's they're trying to tie it into their own big franchise. Warner Brothers figures, well, we're not doing very well with the superheroes, let's see if we can do monsters. So I think it did really well. I think it is a big action-packed blockbuster movie. And I think that's kind of where Peter Jackson's movie failed. It got all the big, it had the right scope, but I think it just wasn't fun. It didn't have the bit. It didn't have explosions. It didn't have the weight of. It had the weight of the drama, but it didn't really have the weight of what's necessary to have things connect to audiences, and that's why that movie's kind of very. I like it is a very sterile movie, as opposed to this movie, which is kind of big and brash and throwing stuff in your face. And I really liked it. It's directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts, who previous to this, he says on IMDb that he directed a movie called The Kings of Summer, which I haven't seen. It's kind of a lower budget movie, and it seems to me he's kind of comes out of the field that Colin Trevorrow did. Colin Trevorrow did with starting with Safety Not Guaranteed and then moving on to Jurassic World, and now Star Wars Episode 9. And I think that's a good place to go and get directors, people who you probably wouldn't think would be able to do these big time visual effects movies, and they come out of nowhere and just knock it right knock it right out of the park. It's got a great cast. It's got a really stand-up cast. It's got a lot of Marvel alumni, like Tom Hiddleston, Samuel L. Jackson, and Brie Larson's going to be joining them later as Captain Marvel. And it's good to see other people in the movie, like John C. Reilly, who does really well. He's got a standout role, and I'll talk more about him in a little bit. But and John Goodman, again, it's always good to see him. And so the movie starts all the way back in 1944 at the tail end of World War II, and this American pilot gets shot down with a Japanese pilot, and they both crash land on this island, and they're starting to fight each other, and shoot at each other, and then out of nowhere Kong shows up, and then that's the last you see of them for an hour or two, and then there's this great newsreel type, going through time and showing us how the world has changed in the past 40 years. Very much like how Godzilla started 2 years ago with the whole newsreel footage. And we're introduced to Bill Randa, played by John Goodman, who is the one of the founding members of Project Monarch, which did get previously brought up in Godzilla. And through him, we learn that they are this kind of fledgling government agency who are having trouble getting funding from the government, and so their last ditch effort is with the senator, played by Richard Jenkins, who is, it's kind of like, wow, Richard Jenkins is in this movie, awesome. And Richard Jenkins is just so tired of seeing them show up, so they're like, he's like, okay, fine, just promise me this is gonna be the end of it. And they're like, yeah, sure, so he arranges them to get military escort with Samuel L. Jackson, who plays this kind of power mad general who again, this movie is set up at the very end of the Vietnam War, and he was this high ranking general, and obviously we didn't win that war, and he doesn't see it that way. He's telling Brie Larson's character, that we didn't lose the war, we abandoned it. And that's you know, I don't want to get way off topic here, but that's a war I've always been kind of fascinated by. I've always thought that would, you know, I was always regretted not being able to take. I don't know if my college ever offered it, but I would have loved to have taken like a Vietnam War class and just kind of learn how that got started and how it, you know, how it ended where it ended. But so they get the escort and they need a tracker for their expedition. So they, you know, they go find Tom Hiddleston's character, who is this kind. You know, the whole movie, I feel like there's this longer extended version where you got to see a little more character development, because it's kind of it has a good pace, but it's almost a little too fast, and it's like you want to know more about these characters. You want to know what their background angle from, and you only kind of get the vaguest notion of it. And but you know, they're all paired together on this ship, and they go to Skull Island to set off these what they call our seismic charges. They're all under the guise of this geology experiment to send the seismic charges on the ground to kind of measure the level of hollow earth under the bedrock of the island. And of course, this sets off Kong, and he starts this really epic sequence of throwing trees into air, you know, helicopters, and tearing the helicopters apart, throwing people out of the helicopters. Just really, you know, this is Kong unleashed. This isn't the, you know, this isn't, you know, Andy Serkis, you know, just, you know, really sitting there and brooding all the time. This is really just, you know, a knockout brawler. And, you know, the whole crew is all, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to get home? So they end up stumbling across the downed pilot from 1944, who is now John C. Reilly, in this kind of, the whole movie, I think, is a send-up of Apocalypse Now. When I say a send-up, I don't mean as a parody. I mean it's more of an homage, as kind of a style guide to follow. And he sort of was, to me, the Dennis Hopper character, who's like, hey, man, you know, how's it going, man? You know, is like happy to see another American there. And, you know, the trailers kind of not belie his character a bit, but they kind of lead you to believe he's the comic relief of the movie. And he is in parts, but there is also this really strong through line with his character that shouldn't be ignored. And you get to see him, you know, really taking, you know, Samuel Jackson and Tom Hiddleston, they're the stars of the movie, but he, you know, he really shouldn't be ignored in this. And he's really, really good. And also Brie Larson does a really good job as well. I think it was a little too on the nose that they give her the name Weaver, as in Sigourney Weaver, and this whole movie's kind of, you know, a Marines kind of alien style, you know, mission. So I thought that was a little on the nose, but again, she does a good job. She actually does kind of look a little bit like Sigourney Weaver herself in places. And I know a big thing that's going to come up about this movie is the soundtrack. I know a lot of people are going to be really tired of hearing the same kind of Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad-y style soundtrack, where you have, like, you know, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Black Sabbath. And I don't think it's a big deal. I think that, you know, again, it makes more sense in this movie because it is set in the 70s, as opposed to, you know, like Suicide Squad, where they're trying to follow so hard in the footsteps of Guardians of the Galaxy. And, but again, the whole movie is this big, brash adventure. I think somebody online that reviewed it before said it was like if Joe Dante directed Jurassic Park. And I think Joe Dante would have made it a little more fun, but again, it is going to be, I think, a big crowd-pleasing movie. I admit I had to cover my eyes a couple of times for the giant spider sequence, which thankfully isn't long, but I can't deal with giant spiders. I don't know what Warner Brothers, I don't know what fetish they have for giant spiders in their movies. It's in Harry Potter, it's in Lord of the Rings, and that's why I can't deal with those kinds of scenes. So, that's why, the superhero movies, they don't have giant spiders in them, but, yeah, again, the whole movie I think is really good. I give it 7 out of 10 stars, and it's a really long credit sequence, but